Hello everybody! Hi. It's finally time. I've played through Metroid Prime 3 and I'm here to tell you exactly how I feel about it. Just like in my last video, I'm going to be comparing it to the previous game of the series. I mentioned Prime 1 a lot when talking about Prime 2, and I feel like I can't help but mention Prime 2 when talking about Prime 3. Anyways, without any further hold up, I'd like to tell you how Metroid Prime 3 blew my expectations out of the water. At the beginning of the game, you start aboard a Federation ship. It's pretty cool that you get to work directly with the Federation in this game. You walk through a bit of the daily life of a space hunter for a bit when suddenly space pirates launch an ambush on your fleet. You work to keep the vessel from being taken over and eventually get sent to help out with the rest of the remaining pirates attacking the Federation base on planet Norian. This whole sequence takes place in about 40 minutes of gameplay, and I was enthralled. Not only was Metroid Prime 2's story interesting for about a total of 30 minutes, but Prime 3's storytelling really shows its face right away. By now, you've met 3 other space hunters in Samus's same position, you've discovered the Federation is experimenting with channeling Phazon through their weapons, and you've worked through an air battle with your nemesis. And let's not skim over this. The Federation, who are extremely well known for being terrible at making weapons they cannot control, are experimenting with Phazon weaponry. Terrible idea, honestly. But it does end up working in your favor. Dark Samus shows up and essentially kamikazes the building you and the other hunters are collected in, infecting everybody with Phazon. Luckily, Samus wakes to find that her power suit has been upgraded with Federation technology to stop her from being further infected by the Phazon in her system. With this technology, she can also charge Phazon through her arm cannon. This is the new outfit that you'll be seeing throughout the game, the PED outfit. And I gotta say, it looks pretty good. At this point, I'm a little shocked they still use the Varia suit for Smash Bros. When this outfit exists at the end of the Prime story, and the Fusion suit exists at the end of the current Metroid story. I'm rambling. For the duration of this game, you essentially have to travel to different nearby planets to destroy these Phazon seeds before they spread to the whole planet, or get used for research by the space pirates in the area. On your way to every seed though, you find that all 3 of your comrade space hunters were overcome by Phazon in the Dark Samus attack. Now they're fighting to keep you away from the seeds, and every battle with them becomes really cinematic for that reason. The cherry on top though, these guys aren't even the final bosses of their areas. They have fully fleshed out boss fights as a mini-boss in each world, and I just think that is so cool. It's also kinda bittersweet though, as none of these space hunters survive their encounters with you. Eventually, Samus makes her way to a space pirate homeworld to take out the final seed and is confronted by the big man of the space pirates himself, Ridley. This battle is awesome, and it feels completely different to his slow and boring fight from Prime 1. He's got a ton of new moves, some of which you might recognize from Smash Bros, and overall, it's just a more engaging fight with more windows of opportunity to attack. But as usual, defeating Ridley is just another stepping stone for Samus. She goes on to join the Federation soldiers in what might be the coolest story event in any of these games, and finds a tower where she can seize control over the Phazon Leviathan the pirates were experimenting on. Then the Federation opens a Leviathan wormhole in space and brings the entire fleet towards the planet Phase. Phase, of course, is the planet where Phazon originates and the planet Dark Samus currently resides. Upon stepping foot on Phase, Samus's infection has become worse and her emergency Phazon ventilation is forced to run at full power. Samus goes into permanent hyper mode, Phazon coursing through her veins, and you know that makes for some fantastic gameplay segments. But we'll get to that. Samus finally faces Dark Samus, overcomes her, and destroys planet Phase for the greater good. A good amount of Federation ships were destroyed in this blast, and Samus herself almost gets lost in the explosion, but naturally, she makes it through the portal just fine and flies off into space. So that's my rundown of the story. Mixed a few gameplay elements in there, but I just want to show you how engaging this game can be. The whole time I was working my way through the gameplay, I was wondering what might happen in the next scene that I get to. This game took a great gameplay formula and mixed it with storytelling that I've never seen in a Metroid game. Forget about the storytelling. Now we are getting into the raw Metroid Prime exploration experience that we all know and love. Well, mostly. See, I have no issue with this game and how its maps are laid out. In my opinion, they tackled backtracking and forward-moving progress much better than Prime 1 or 2 ever did. But, and this but is pretty big, it's more linear than ever. Also, the maps are often broken up between different landing spots that you can bring your ship to. Sometimes these areas are connected from one landing zone to the next, but oftentimes there's a landing zone that leads you to a completely different section of the map that you couldn't have accessed otherwise. I don't think this was a bad choice, but it does take away from having the map feel like one big open area. The way maps are designed in this game, it sometimes feels like you're walking through a straight line of rooms to get to your objective instead of exploring each room to see how you're meant to progress. As for how I feel about the linearity, I loved it. It's possible I just came from Prime 2 and I needed a more chill experience, but I'm also a huge fan of Metroid Fusion, a game which is also famous for its linearity in the Metroid series. In the grand scheme of things, I think the linearity works well for this game, because it helps the pacing of the story to remain consistent. It also kept me chasing new upgrades, which I liked. And it's not like the exploration and backtracking aren't there, you're just sort of funneled into going in the right direction sometimes. Let's actually talk about those upgrades that I mentioned. I love how they were implemented this time around. Instead of ending the game with a handful of beams you constantly have to switch between just to open a few doors in a row, you actually get a system that works with the flow of the game. They simply override your latest beam with whichever one you pick up, and it has all the abilities of the last one that you used. Instead of giving you a hot and a cold beam, or a light and a dark beam to do different things, they give you ice missiles and a plasma beam after you obtain the upgrades. I can't get over how good all of this is for the series as a whole, and I can only hope that Prime 4 will be taking ideas from this game in that regard. Another thing about the upgrades you'll be getting through this game, they're all new. It's not like they're things we've never seen before in the series, but they are all upgrades that we don't start with at the beginning of the game. Prime 3 is the only Prime series game that doesn't strip Samus of her upgrades at the beginning just to recycle them later on. You have the Morph Ball, the Double Jump, the Charge Beam, the Missiles, the Grapple Beam, and pretty much everything that generally comes to mind when thinking of Samus off the top of the head. Finally, we have a Prime game that doesn't just feel like you're trying to become as strong as you once were, and instead feels like you're becoming stronger than you've ever been. Alongside these new upgrades, we also have upgrades for how Samus can use her phase-on with the PED suit. You get the Hyper Beam, the Hyper Ball, the Hyper Missiles, and the Hyper Grapple. These all become quite useful as you traverse the game. It costs a whole energy tank to activate Hyper Mode, and for a limited amount of time, you can blast the hell out of anything in your way. The Hyper Mode function of this game is a much better life management system than the Dark Ether in Prime 2 could ever hope to be. Now the risk reward is at your fingertips, and you get to decide when it's best to use or not use the Hyper Mode. Okay, I'd like to dedicate this segment of the video to my personal favorite upgrade of this game, the Grapple Beam. I know that might sound a bit silly, but hear me out. In this game, the Grapple Beam serves primarily as a pulling device from the start of the game, only being used to swing Samus later in the second world. And while this function may seem like an easy way for Nintendo to force their motion control gimmick onto the player, it's actually really responsive and it brings way more to the table than that. The grapple in this game can be used in combat versus a ton of different enemy types, opening a weak spot or serving as a bit of a stun, giving you a leg up. Not to mention the grapple alone gets 4 upgrades throughout this game. Hell, your ship even gets a grapple beam at one point, and I just think that's wonderful. Long story short, I want to see this return for Prime 4 in some way. If they can somehow make the combat even more engaging with this idea, I would love to see it. The grapple was absolutely great. Let's not skip too quickly over the ship though. The ship is something you'll be controlling quite often throughout this game actually. It's got some neat bits and bobs and you can mess with it and even keeps track of your data, but most often this ship is used for travel. Eventually you do find missile upgrades for your ship and the grapple function of course, both of which are used by commanding the ship with Samus' special visor. I think giving 2 visor slots out to the scan and ship visors was smart too, because you essentially only ever have to swap your default visor for the X-ray visor, which isn't as tasking as having 2 different visors to consider. The last thing I want to touch on for the upgrades is the screw attack. It wasn't a good implementation in Prime 2, and although it's handled a little better in this game, it's still just super clunky. I don't really want a jumping function that takes me into what is essentially a cutscene just to wait a few seconds before getting back into first person. The wall jump timing is a lot more lenient though, which is kinda nice, cause Prime 2 was a little cutthroat with that. Okay, final segment. I've talked about so much, but one of the more egregious things about Prime 2 was its awful boss designs. Long story short, it's a lot of waiting, and every boss was pretty much just a bigger version of any regular enemy in the world. In this game though, every boss is totally their own thing again. They went right back to their unique boss ideas from Prime 1 and made way more use of them. Not only are the fights with the 3 space hunters fantastic, but you get to fight everything from giant-ass space pirates to phase-on Metroid hatchers. The biggest thing they improved about these boss fights though has got to be the fact that you almost never get forced to wait something out. Compared to Prime 2, this game completely takes the waiting part of every boss fight and throws it out the window. There's almost always something that you can shoot at to open up the enemy. And if nothing I've said about this game so far makes you want to play it, just look at this boss fight. It's incredible! You're stuck in hyper mode and you just get to face Dark Samus in the most honest 1v1 the series has yet seen. You're armed with your hyper mode beam and a crazy minigun shot in your charge beam. Dark Samus also dances around and multiplies herself. It's crazy. I honestly couldn't believe how much fun I was having for this entire boss. I absolutely loved it. Talk about a climax to a video game. Well, I think that's everything that I had to talk about, and we've reached the end of this video. After I played Prime 2, I thought if Prime 3 was gonna be similar, then I might not even like what they do with Prime 4. But I can confidently say if they take anything from this game, it's good news for me. I'm so excited to hear more about that game in the future, and I am so excited to play Metroid Dread here on the channel when that comes out. If you like this video, consider subscribing and sticking around. We're climbing up to 1,000 subscribers right now, and it would be absolutely insane if we could hit that. And let me know in the comments what you think about Prime 3. I'm pretty sure the public opinion doesn't favor this game over the first two, but I loved my entire 9 hours with it, and it might even be my favorite of the series. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. Let me know what you think about these commentary videos too, because I've been having a ton making them. Anyways, my name's Myloe, and I'm out.